Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
I want to begin with a story from the Daily Mail. There's for Ukraine peace talks. There's Russian TV broadcast Putin warning Donald Trump to stop trying to dictate terms.
One big problem. You can see my sweatpants can see from underneath my dress in every single photo. So let me show you how I use Adobe Photoshop to make my dress.
Sorry about that.
See the photos where I like them to see the dress and wear them on.
Oh, not what we wanted. Here we go. Russian state TV aired a video of Vladimir Putin warning Donald Trump to stop trying to dictate the terms of a ceasefire with Ukraine. I see him trying to do that. He's trying to make himself to be the guy who made it happen. Putin stressed that he plans to finish what he started 3 years ago and warned that Trump should not push him into a U.S. blueprint for stopping the war. The Russian ruler told Kremlin-controlled state TV, you know, the American people and the American leadership, including the president, have their own national interests. We respect that. We proceed from the assumption that we will be treated the same way. The message was released on the eve of a scheduled Monday phone call between Trump and Putin. Putin's words were recorded in late March with broadcast today, after Trump made clear he wants a Russian leader to concede a ceasefire in their upcoming telephone talk. We have enough strength and resources to bring what was started in 2022 to its logical conclusion with the result that Russia needs, according to Putin. Now, gentlemen, I think that Putin's got it exactly right. Russ, well, Joaquin, let me stop with you. This is geopolitical war. Your thoughts?
Yeah, this was America's war all along, and they lost from the very beginning. It was never a war to be won by American and their NATO friends. So they have no terms to be able to even negotiate with Putin because they don't have the cards. Just like Trump is telling, Zelensky he doesn't have the cards. Well, neither does Trump. So, he needs to butt out and take his big ego with him because he's not going to have it his way. It's ultimately going to probably end up Putin's way. And he's probably going to have to go all the way to Kiev because Zelensky's not probably even going to cooperate. And, being prodded and pushed and bullied by Trump, it isn't going to work. He doesn't have any kind of leverage. So, yeah, it's doomed from the start as far as Trump trying to push something, make it happen on his terms. It ain't going to happen. So it's only going to be on Putin's terms, it looks like now.
You make an excellent point, I think, regarding Trump's ego. Remember, of course, he campaigned as a peace president. He was going to stop all these stupid wars in his terms. But now he sent more weapons to Zelensky, making the Ukraine conflict with Russia Trump's war. And of course, he's backing Bibi in Israel, notwithstanding what appears to be purely a feigned separation division of interest, by providing him with ongoing weapons. Frankly, I think Trump has turned out to be the Pied Piper of Israel, leading America right over the cliff. Russ, your thoughts?
Well, it seems that Zelensky has dug in on the exact same position that he had in the White House when Vance and Trump worked him over. He's saying, I'm not going to give up any territory, no territorial concessions. The Russians are asking for 4 obelisks, the Donbass region.
Right.
And it pretty much said now we're gunning for a 5th. So they kind of keep raising the stakes.
Russ, they actually said, no, not a 5th, but 8. 4 more.
8, okay.
Yeah. They're going to.
Up to 8.
And they can have it. I mean,
that's a damn shame, because I would like to see Ukraine survive in some capacity, because there is a Ukrainian people in the West. They're distinct ethnic groups, kind of a distinct culture. They're not Russian. So it would be a damn shame to just see them end up with some kind of tiny little rump state or nothing left, just totally dominated by Russia. I do have some sympathy for Ukraine, but my God, they have to save what they can, You can't have, at this stage, you can't be negotiating with Russia and saying, no, not 1 inch of territory. That's not going to work. I can't believe that here we are in late May and that's still their position. And then the Russians just escalate on them. Okay, 8 obelisks. Very unfortunate. This is really bad. I'm very disappointed. I kind of actually thought, as much as I dislike Trump, I thought that maybe he could bring these parties together on some kind of a compromise solution. But, we're not flies on the wall. We don't really know what's going on, but it seems like Zelensky is a big part of the problem.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. Joaquin, would you agree that Pied Piper image, I'm sorry to say, Trump seems to me to have been the original con man, that this whole thing was a swindle, that he tried to convince us he was going to put America first, but it's always been Israel.
Yeah. Well, I was never fooled by him. I always saw him as a con man, a showman in orange face, not to be trustworthy. And he's proving that point. Yeah, it's a no-win situation. He's not going to be able to leverage anything with Putin. And Putin's been very flexible, actually. He's been the guy that's actually been kind of like conceding on a couple of points, that they would come up with some kind of agreement and at least be working on one anyway. But it looks like Trump and his pretty much war hawk administration is really going to push this, where it looks like the whole thing could blow up, where Russia has to go all the way to the Polish border. I hate that it would happen that way, but I don't see any kind of concessions on Trump and the West. I don't see it.
Yes. Meanwhile, here we have one of Ukraine's brigade battalion commanders resigning, slamming the military leadership over stupid objectives. This is from the Kiev Independent. This is from a Ukrainian newspaper. Let's check this out.
Wow, no censorship on this, huh?
Surprising. Alexander Shirishin, battalion commander of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade, has submitted his resignation, sharply criticizing Ukraine's military leadership, what he describes as senseless orders and unnecessary casualties. I have never received more stupid objectives than in the current direction, Shirishin wrote in a blunt Facebook post announcing his decision on May 16th. Someday I'll tell you the details, but the stupid loss of people trembling in front of a stupid generals lead to nothing but failures. I hope your children will also serve in the infantry and carry out your orders. I think he must have meant not serve in the infantry. The Ukraine General Staff, tagged in Shirishin's post, had not commented on the matter at the time of publication. The Kiev Independent reported in 2023 that the brigade, which was formed from scratch in 2022 and is often known by the name of Magura, was prepared with a summer 2023 counteroffensive in mind. Its soldiers trained in NATO countries and equipped with superior new Western equipment. In 2024, the brigade was engaged in combat operation within the Kursk Oblast. Tell me your thoughts, Joaquin. I mean, that's pretty remarkable to have a battalion commander resigned in the middle of a war. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and not get fired first.
Or shot.
Or killed.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing the disintegration of the Ukraine army. There's just not much of it left now. And they really don't even have much of a defense. I think that the Russian forces are making greater gains now than ever before in the over 3-year-long war now. So, it's just a matter of time before they cross the Dnieper River and head towards Kiev. I mean, it's going to happen very soon. I think the AWOLs of the Ukraine army are just off the chart. Who wants to die? And it's a no-win situation. So they're not going to be following orders. If the general's saying screw this, you're going to go all the way down the ranks, and they're all going to feel the same way. So there's not much, I don't think, much resistance left by Ukraine military.
Russ, your thoughts?
The clue of that, was he a general or a colonel? General?
General.
Yeah.
The clue to his statement, he was talking about Kursk. I mean, Kursk was really a bad operation. They sent a lot of their top troops in there, got them chewed up, eventually surrounded. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about that whole campaign of just wasting sort of it almost kind of sounds like the Battle of Kursk in 1943, where the Germans just threw kind of almost like suicide attacks into the Kursk corridor. And it's kind of like a repeat of that. So that's what he's criticizing, the waste of their equipment and soldiers in that ridiculous Kursk excursion that did not work.
Yes.
And they're now moving it into the Sumy region across the border from Kursk into Ukraine, the Russians are. So, it hasn't worked out at all.
I thought that Sumy was good. I thought Sumy would be the fifth veterans that they're after.
Russ, your last thought, you and Joaquin were.
Oh, yeah. I thought that Sumy was going to be the fifth obelisk that the Russians are after. And so that's where this current offensive is.
Yeah.
But you're saying they're going after 8, so that means they're not going to stop at Sumy. They're going to keep pushing on. You know what the other obelisks are?
I know Odessa's included.
Yeah. Here we go. It's Colonel McGregor on Trump's unrealistic expectations.
Do this ozone trick every morning and watch your vision.
I'm so impressed by McGregor.
And I'm sure that someone somewhere has tried to explain this to the president. We have no leverage. Whatever we've done has been a terrible mistake. We've destroyed relations with Russia. We should normalize relations with Russia. But to do that, we've got to end our, connection to this Ukrainian regime, stop funding and supporting the war. That has to happen. We have to admit that ultimately what happens in eastern Ukraine is a matter for Russian decision, not ours. It's never been an area of vital strategic interest to us, and it's not likely to become an area of vital strategic interest anytime soon. In fact, during World War II, as we got into the war and we were fighting and we approached the sort of end of middle to end of 1944, the truth was that we wanted to ensure that we overran Germany, not the Russians, not the Soviets at that point. Germany is what counted. Who controlled Poland was largely irrelevant to us. There was nothing in Poland except nice Polish people. But Germany was different. We ended up with a little more than half of what was there. And that was an unsatisfactory outcome, and that led to the Cold War. Well, the problem for us is that we were too slow to pick up. Our forces moved too slowly. We lost the opportunity for a clear-cut victory. Well, this time around, The people with the real interest are the Russians, not us. We just don't have any interest in that part of the world. And I think President Trump knows that. He will probably say what any American would say. I hope these people can just get along. Well, that may or may not happen, but the point is it's not our affair. He just needs to get out. And that much, I think, Vice President Vance gets right. But otherwise, if we continue to stick our nose into this, we'll make it worse. We need to get out of it. I think that President Trump has unrealistic expectations. He doesn't seem to understand that we can't mediate because we're part of it. Now, the second part is that I think President Putin has tried very hard to be polite and to the extent that he can be flexible, to be flexible. But he's restated his preconditions for any sort of ceasefire from the beginning. And those preconditions require the acceptance of neutrality for Ukraine, the acceptance of the oblasts that the Russians took, that are Russian-speaking oblasts, that they're not going to surrender, and end to any further discussion about Crimea, which is Russian. And then, obviously, some discussion about denazification, which, we should have absolutely no objections to. And what sort of Ukraine emerges from that with elections and so forth and so on. Those things are all areas where there is some flexibility, except for the denazification. President Trump doesn't seem to have understood that. And so he seems to think that if he can't persuade President Putin to adopt his position, which is let's have a ceasefire and talk, then he's just going to pick up his toys and go away. I don't think President Trump understands that his toys are still in the game. And as long as they're in the game, his credibility is almost zero.
I think that's really excellent commentary. I mean, the United States is arming Ukraine. How can the United States negotiate a settlement between Ukraine and Russia? It's absurd on its face.
But how do you salvage Ukraine? I mean, salvage a realistic Ukraine, say west of the Dnieper or the minus the 5 oblasts or whatever. How do you salvage that?
You stop sending weapons.
That would be very easy.
Stop sending weapons, then you might get a situation where the Russians just do overrun the whole country. So I'm just trying to put myself in the hands in the shoes of Ukrainians that might want to have a country emerge from all this with a little bit of independence, with a little bit of sovereignty. I think they need to have a standing army. They don't have to be involved with NATO necessarily, but they probably will want to be involved with NATO. They want to have strong ties with Europe. So some of the goals of Ukraine are not unrealistic. They can be done.
Well,
that's what they're talking about. It doesn't seem like that's what the issues are here.
Russ. Putin doesn't want Ukraine. He only wants those territories where they're Russian ethnic friendly. The Russians scattered throughout Ukraine, but there cannot be a NATO on the border there. I mean, the idea of in any way, shape, or form, Ukraine.
What relationship does Ukraine have with NATO? They have to have some relationship with Europe and NATO.
No, they are neutral. They are to be neutral. Yeah, this is not a hard point.
All they need to do is put a president in there that is neutral or even friendly to Russia. Like they had the one that they kicked out.
Yeah, Zelensky's got to go. That's a given. I'm just trying to figure out a way out for Ukraine. I'm really getting kind of disturbed by all this because
the way out for Ukraine is to accept Russia's term. Right? They fought a war and they lost. Russia's the victor. Russia, as the victor, dictates the terms. Just do it. This Zelensky is just a tool. He's got himself unbelievably rich by grift after all this money being sent to Ukraine. They've been reselling weapons of war to make more money. It's just the most corrupt nation on the face of earth. Joaquin.
Yeah, even before the war, when they would rate the nations on corruption, Ukraine was right at the top, It was notorious. And yet, America wanted that, NATO country on the border, like they always want, let's weaken Russia, put all the enemies on their border and weaken Russia, Well, it backfired, and so, yeah, but Putin's a very fair man, I believe, and he has no interest he wants good relations with Europe and America. Now, it isn't going to come because there's some buttheads in Europe that are so obstinate, but maybe at least there can be some kind of friendly relations, perhaps, with Trump, but then again, the ego and the belligerence might totally undermine it. So yeah, I mean, there's so much.
The whole thing about pushing for a ceasefire is really tricky. I mean, I think that's pretty sleazy because that just takes away any offensive capability that Russia has this summer to go on the offensive.
Sure.
So that's kind of a phony starting point right there.
Right. That's why Putin won't consider it. He sees right through it.
But then they just get stuck and they can't deal with these territorial issues because Zelensky's just so hardcore. So I mean, I think maybe Trump needs to be a little bit more honest with what he's dealing with, what the issues are. We're not hearing very much about that. They're kind of bombastic and act like everything's going great. What are they talking about? What are the issues? There doesn't seem to be much transparency on that.
Well, I think Trump is promoting the Israeli agenda that even extends to Ukraine. Remember, they want Ukraine to be the new Israel. That was part and parcel of the whole plan.
Yeah, business deals, right? Jewish business deals, exactly. BlackRock.
Trump initially cut off weapons to Ukraine. He should have stood pat. He had that right off the bat. He did the right thing. We were all applauding him. We thought maybe he was going to be true to his word to stop these stupid wars. And then, lo and behold, he resumes sending weapons and arms. What the F? What's going on, Donald Trump, peace president? Joaquin,
a lot of Ukraine fatigue in Europe now. Like in the Czech Republic, there's like 300,000 or 400,000 Ukrainians in the country. And when they first started coming in 2 years ago, they were kind of welcome. Everybody had the flags out. Everybody was pro-Ukraine. And that is all gone, the fatigue. So there's a lot of suffering.
Well, some of the countries want to send them back to Ukraine now.
Right. And there's no more money rolling in for relief or charity or anything. They're just being thrown under the bus.
Yeah. Well, McGregor, as usual, has it right. Meanwhile, Russia's drones are more deadly. Okay. Hegseth reportedly ordered Ukraine aid pause without Trump's knowledge. That's very curious. Let's take a look at that. This is again from the Kiev Independent. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's office ordered a temporary halt of military aid flights to Ukraine in early February. Well, is this the one we were praising Trump for? It was actually Hegseth? Without notifying the White House, Reuters reported on May 6, citing unnamed sources. The suspension reportedly affected 11 shipments of artillery shells and weapons from Dover Air Force Base and a U.S. base in the United Arab Emirates. An order issued about a week after President Trump began his second term caused immediate concern in Kiev and among officials in Poland who contacted Washington for answers. Top national security officials at the White House, Pentagon, and State were unaware of the decision and could not respond to inquiries. The flights resumed February 5th after a 3-day pause following an alleged intervention from U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, who, of course, has now been demoted, made UN's ambassador to the UN. Reuters report in February, the U.S. briefly halted weapon shipments while the White House debated its policy toward Kiev. I find that kind of fascinating. In other words, even what I was giving Trump credit for, doing the right thing, may not have been Trump at all, but Hegseth, Joaquin.
And same with Israel. Seems like Hegseth has actually turned out to be kind of a voice of reason. All this stuff is just shocking.
It is. Joaquin, give me your thought.
Yeah, that was the only bright spot recently was when they stopped all weapon shipments and they had to concede a lot of territory at the time. We just got to pray that Trump makes the right decision and stops all assistance and the war will end. I mean, it's that simple. That's what makes it so crazy.
Yeah, and similarly with...
everybody in the world wants it to end, but... there's powers that control presidents, and so we have war.
And even more so,
the question is why hasn't Zelensky been tossed out? Because we were kind of speculating on that 2 months ago, and he somehow been able to survive and build up his support within the Ukrainian establishment. It's flabbergasting. I mean, there should be an assassination attempt on the guy. Something's got to happen to the guy. A coup d'état. He
can't last too much longer. He just can't.
Well,
we've been saying that for a while. As you
say.
Yeah. I mean, we're just going back over all our predictions how this thing would unfold, and I think we were all much more optimistic that we would be further along than we were.
Well, we believe that's because we believe Trump. We didn't realize he was a con man. I'm really, really upset. Now, it turns out they're letting a little bit of food into Gaza, except the UN says none of it has arrived yet. Here we have from antiwar.com. Netanyahu announces Israel will be allowed a basic amount of food to enter Gaza. What does that mean, a basic amount? PM Netanyahu announced Sunday Israel would allow a basic amount of food to enter Gaza after a more than 70-day total blockade on the Palestinian territory. On the recommendation of the IDF, and out of operational need to enable the expansion of the intense fighting to defeat Hamas, Israel will introduce a basic amount of food to the population in order to ensure that a famine crisis does not develop in the Gaza Strip. Too late. That news Abbas said in a statement. But get this, what Smotrich says. Allowing minimal aid into Gaza will ensure Israel can destroy the Strip. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said Monday, allowing minimal aid into Gaza will ensure Israel
listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be
to continue
right
with its goal of destroying the Palestinian territory. That means the onslaught. That means killing or removing every one of them. Smotrich comment came after more than 70 days of Israel's total blockade of Gaza, and a day after PM Netanyahu said Israel would allow a
management would like to take a moment to thank the listeners and hosts for all their support that has made Revolution Radio one of the biggest platforms for free speech in an ever-growing dark world of censorship. Unfortunately, this platform for free speech has never been free. We need the support of the people. It is the people like you, yes, you, that keeps the station in the front lines of the battle against tyranny and oppression. Please help support Revolution Radio so free speech will not be silenced in a world that seems to be going deaf to the real truth. With your support, we will be able to become an even bigger pillar of light in a dark world.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet.
Even
Revolution
and France and Germany are basically saying, "Hey, you gotta, do the humanitarian thing and bring in the relief." But my understanding is small churches saying, we just put minimum amount to placate our allies. In other words, Europe and America will be appeased by 1% of the stuff getting in.
Yes, I'm sure.
It's just so.
Listen.
The whole world knows that Israel is a pariah nation, and by association in the U.S. we are too.
Hang on, we're not hearing it, but maybe the break music is playing and so forth. I've heard before that those who were listening couldn't understand us because of both, and some left. So let's just take a temporary pause. I'm going to grab some ice water. Let's give about 2 minutes and let it play out, and then we'll resume.
At
Stand by.
freedomslips.com, the People Station.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, I don't know if that mattered or not, but I will say that this new Teams, which has been used to replace Skype, in my opinion, is a disaster. It's not easy to use. It's not easy to record. Everything about it is bad. But get this, in furtherance of my observations about Trump in relation to Netanyahu being on the same page, here we have a report.
President John is a humanitarian, and I think that everyone is concerned about the humanitarian conditions in Gaza. That said, it is a very complicated situation there. Logistically, I don't think there's any daylight between President Trump's position and Prime Minister Netanyahu's position. The issue now is how do we logistically get all of those trucks into Gaza? How do we set up the aid stations? There are many initiatives that we're working on to address this. The President, John, is a humanitarian.
Right.
I think that everyone is concerned about the humanitarian conditions in Gaza. That said, it is a very complicated situation there. Logistically,
Is it just
very complicated?
That's just ridiculous. There's anything complicated about it. You bring that food and you give it to the starving people.
Yeah, what a bunch of Janus faces. The guy's a big humanitarian.
Right. If he's a humanitarian, I haven't seen a single sign of it. Have you, Joaquin?
It's been going on for 2 years.
No, there's no excuse. No excuse for this. It's so disgusting. Beyond words.
In Europe, the politics of Europe might really be changing, because I was talking to some Germans that I know, and they were telling me that this whole Holocaust shit has been going on for all these years, and Germany's wearing off, and a lot of Germans had it with the Israelis.
Yeah, I think
Israel, and they really
worldwide.
they're really having it with the suppression of any kind of discussion of this kind of stuff and being called anti-Semites for, vocalizing.
For criticizing genocide? That makes you an anti-Semite, and be an anti-Semite, because genocide is totally unacceptable, grotesque.
So the message we're getting from the radicals in Israel is that we're just going to starve these people. I mean, what animal? What is it? That's
animals. That's inhumane.
Starvation diet.
Well, know that none of the neighbors are going to accept the Arab Palestinians in their countries. It looks like they're going to starve people. That's their end goal now.
That is the agenda. There's no doubt about it. Meanwhile, we know all the usual. Is Israel continuing to kill hundreds of Palestinians? There's nothing new there.
Yeah, it looks like they're running over 100 a day and just indiscriminate bombings.
Yeah. 72 hours, 300. And that's what they can count.
Yeah, here further confirmation. UK, France, and Canada say suffering in Gaza is intolerable. Threat to sanction Israel. Why are they only doing this now, for crying out loud? They could have done this years ago. Just outrageous.
Sanction. Just do it.
Right.
Italy.
Right.
Basically, the Italian parliament just erupted. They were kind of going after what's the prime minister's name? Maloney, just sitting there sheepishly, kind of as they just castigated her. They had several members of that parliament just castigating Maloney, and she just sitting there almost in shame, like there's no way she could defend her position anymore.
She can't. I mean, that's just a brutal fact of the matter. It's grotesque. 3 major Western governments issued a statement condemning the Israeli-created starvation in Gaza and settlement expansion in the West Bank. The UK, France, and Canada said they are considering sanctions on Israel in response to the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. We strongly oppose the expansion of Israel's military operations in Gaza. The level of human suffering in Gaza is intolerable. The joint statement from London, Paris, and Ottawa said, we call on the Israeli government to stop its military operations in Gaza and immediately allow humanitarian aid to enter. The statement was released following an announcement from Tel Aviv that a basic amount of food would be allowed to enter the Strip. The 3 countries called the Israeli plan wholly inadequate. But of course, that's by design. It's supposed to be wholly inadequate. Then we have tens of thousands marching in the Netherlands to protest against the Gaza genocide. Tens of thousands of red-clad protesters have marched to The Hague to call on the Netherlands government to do more to halt Israel's onslaught in Gaza. Organizers said it was the country's biggest demonstration in 2 decades, as rally participants pressed the Dutch government Sunday to take action against Israel's genocide in Gaza. The crowd that gathered outside the government seat was estimated to number more than 100,000, according to organizers. Police did not give estimates. I would bet it was even larger. Meanwhile, pro-Palestinian protesters rally around the world to mark Nakba Day. Tens of thousands staged mass protests worldwide to mark 77 years of Palestinian dispossession. Tens of thousands have rallied across the world in solidarity with Palestinians amid Israel's brutal war in Gaza and to mark the 1948 ethnic cleansing of Palestinians by Jewish militias, remembered as the Nakba, or catastrophe. The Nakba resulted in the permanent mass displacement of Palestinians after the creation of Israel in 1948. Activists say history is repeating itself today in Gaza and the occupied West Bank. In Stockholm, thousands assembled at Otaplan Square, responding to calls from various civil society organizations to protest against Israeli attacks on Gaza. Participants waved Palestinian flags, displayed photographs of children killed, and carried banners stating, "Stop the Zionist regime genocide in Palestine. And one more. Top genocide scholars unanimous. Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. A growing number of the world's leading genocide scholars believe that Israel's action in Gaza constitutes genocide, according to an investigation by the Dutch newspaper NRC. The paper interviewed 7 renowned genocide and Holocaust researchers from 6 countries, including Israel, all of whom described the Israeli campaign in Gaza as genocidal. Many said their peers in the field shared this assessment. Can I name someone whose work I respect who does not think it is genocide? No. There's no counter-argument that takes into account all the evidence. Israeli researcher Raz Siegel told NRC. Professor Ugur Umut Ungar of the University of Amsterdam in NIOD Institute for War, Holocaust, and Genocide Studies said that while there were certainly researchers who say it's not genocide, I don't know them. The Dutch paper reviewed 25 recent academic articles published in the Journal of Genocide Research, the field's leading journal, and found that all 8 academics from the field of genocide studies see genocide, or at least genocidal violence in Gaza, to which I must say, how could they not? How could they not? How could they not? Joaquin.
Well, I love to see all this anti-Israel sentiment and protests in the streets. That sends the message. We are not anti-Semitic. We are anti-genocide. So stop it. The whole world is now behind the Palestinians, except for the U.S. government and Israel. So it's going to come to some kind of climax. It has to, because it can't go on as it has been for the last over a year and a half now of total slaughter every day. It can't go on.
But we know what Bibi the Butcher thinks. It will end when every Palestinian is dead or no longer in the borders of Israel. Isn't it that straightforward, Russ?
Well, the Zionist media, controlled or influenced by Zionists, are starting to change. They're even starting to use the term genocide more and more. Long overdue. I've noticed that Piers Morgan is really getting strident. He's kind of pissed off about the humanitarian side of it. He was challenging some Israeli official, I think it was yesterday, about the complete lack of journalistic coverage in Gaza. He says, how come you're not letting people in there to observe? We can confirm or deny your side of the story about what's going on. You won't even do that. So he's getting to be very outspoken. But the question I have, who are they going to get rid of first, Piers Morgan or Netanyahu? That's my question. Because I'd ask the same question about Netanyahu as I am Zelensky. Why is he still there?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he has more political lives than a cat. It's astonishing, his career. Absolutely astonishing. Meanwhile, Alistair Cook says Israel is in moral meltdown.
They don't believe.
Let's check it out. This is he's with Judge Napolitano, who is, in my opinion, a great guy. Let's see what we got here.
This. While the markets are giving us whiplash, keep buying. And Minister Netanyahu eventually bowed to U.S. pressure to agree to a substantial, verifiable, inviolable ceasefire.
I think I doubt it. I don't think there's any intention of that. We've seen what is clearly happening. We called it in a paper that we wrote on the Conflict Forum Substack, the moral meltdown in Israel. And I just want to underline, because people may not really sort of understand this because they're not following it so closely, this is a real pivot point that is taking place, not just in Israel, but for the West as a whole. And what it is essentially, I mean, let's not go get tangled up in the details, but essentially, Israel is completely divided. On the one hand, you have, if you like, those who see themselves as European Jews that have come from Europe and are Europeanized. And they, on the other hand, you have the Messianic people of Ben-Gvir and the Prime Minister and the right who are looking to Amalek, to, if you like, removing the Palestinians from Gaza altogether, either killing them by bombing them or either sending them somewhere else. Libya has been mentioned, but I don't know if that's going to work at all. But this is a moral divide now. And long ago, someone warned the West very clearly. He said, what will happen is, in due course, under pressure, the West would turn on its own moral values and then start consuming itself like an Ouroboros. And this is what's happening in Israel. It is now becoming violent. The police are attacking the demonstrators who are demonstrating for the release of hostages. So half of Israel is doing that. And you find editorials, you find other pieces in the Hebrew press, in the English language press, like Haaretz editorial, that say, we can't go on with this, just killing Palestinians, bombing tents, seeing children burnt alive. We can't do this. And what's happened? I mean, we are supposed to have, you remember that Hamas released the American dual citizen, Eden Alexander, the other day, and it was understood from the American mediators, Witkoff and his colleagues, that that would result in food and resources coming into Gaza. They're not coming into Gaza. They are still in a line outside of Gaza. And there are people, as the UN human rights representative says, there are children starving to death. And Netanyahu had to admit this just the other day. And he said, listen, look, I have senators coming to me, friendly, people who've never been more friendly to Israel. And they're saying, look, we will give you what you want. You want weapons, we will give you protection in the Security Council. But listen, we just cannot endure seeing children starve to death. You've got to do something about it. Well, that still hasn't happened. And where's Witkoff, who played a very important part to begin with? He went to Netanyahu on Shabbat and he said, listen, you had a deal, stick with it, do it. There's no sign of that today. And so we have to wait till the 25th when Netanyahu is saying that. And Netanyahu hopes to get through this period with a short ceasefire, agreed with Hamas, and then some introduction of limited resources, food and water going in. The last few days, every day, it's been 70, 90, 100, 120 Palestinians killed at night in the bombing raids of this new incursion. But I want to move to the second fracture, which is opening out, which is just as important because it's in the United States and in Europe. In the United States, as you know, about 80% of the Jews living in the United States are Reform Jews. And many of them are finding the same moral dilemma that I've just described in Israel. They don't like, and when those senators spoke to Netanyahu in that way and said, listen, we just can't go on like this. We can't see children burnt alive in tents. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable in the US, and it's not acceptable to half of the Israeli population. This is the pivot, the crucial point where, if you like, the West turns on its own moral values and starts to, if you like, destroy itself in this process. Same in Europe. There's videos going around about Meloni being attacked strongly about Gaza, and others too across Europe. This is the moral dilemma that is coming. And we see it in other ways. And this is facing Trump now very much, what to do. And we hear very clearly, I'm told, that now there is this moral divide taking place within his team. On the one hand, Witkoff and Vance on one side, but Rubio totally at odds with Witkoff and trying to remove him from the process. Perhaps that's why Witkoff is not there. Why isn't there an American official down there at Gaza and saying, look, just open those gates, open them, let food in? Of course it would happen, but there's none. So we have to draw our conclusions from that, what that means. And then there's a third fracture, and this is very important fracture too, I think, which is with Iran. Because you've probably seen on ABC in the last day, Witkoff has said the absolute red line for Trump is no enrichment, not ever, in Iran. That is the red line, and that's what we're seeking. And I put on that, I wrote that actually what has happened is almost the entire Senate Republicans have written a letter to Trump saying one thing, that they will not accept an agreement which allows the infrastructure of enrichment to stay in Iran. And 177 of the House have been even more explicit, I think, in the parallel letter that has gone to Trump, which is saying exactly no enrichment at all, even though they must know, Iran will never accept that. You recall I was in Iran about a week or 10 days ago, right, to many people, that they won't accept that. And then I contrasted, what do you see in the Maryland polling that has just come out? It shows that 70% of Americans as a whole want to deal with Iran. And that is true both of the majority in the Republican and the Democrat. And only something, I don't have the figures in front of me, but only something like 25% of Republicans are in favor of military action. So you have this divide too. The popular sentiment, of course, which will probably be ignored, but the popular sentiment wants a deal, doesn't want a war with Iran. I don't think the populists, I don't think the side of Vance and the others.
It's Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
Well, let's pick it up from there. Joaquin, your thoughts. I mean, I think those divides are very real. I think the world has turned against Israel. I don't think they will ever regain any stature in world affairs again. They have disgraced themselves, discredited themselves, incriminated themselves, exposed themselves. It's a catastrophe, in my opinion, from the point of view of politics. For Israel, your thoughts?
Well, I agree. And this makes it even scarier because Netanyahu knows his back is up against the wall with the whole world coming down on him. And he may figure, well, I'm not going to be in power much longer unless I expand this war. And we're hearing intelligence reports again coming out saying they're contemplating bombing the nuclear sites in Iran. And it could happen at any time. We're hearing that again. And he may just decide to do it because he thinks that that's the only way America will be able to continue to support Israel.
Russ.
Well, if there was truly this big divide, and according to Alistair, it's like half of the Israelis are no longer on board this aggressive Messianic stuff, then Netanyahu would be gone. So I just don't believe it. I think it's probably like 75% of these assholes, to use the proper term, are basically supporting these policies and would like to attack Iran and get into a war. It's like end times Messianic stuff. It's religion to them. So yeah, they have blackmail the entire world. Clearly, Europe's starting to move against them, large elements in the United States, but they still have control of these Zog governments. They still run the show. So even these sanctions that we're talking about, why are we even talking about sanctions? You know, where's there a big flotilla going offshore of Gaza and ships landing troops and just taking the place over? Europeans. You know, is there any discussion of that? Somebody to break down the gates? You know, this is not this is not part of Israel. This is not a sovereign part of Israel to close the gates to humanitarian aid. You know, probably would have to be the Europeans. So, but then they're just talking about sanctions. Are you kidding me? What are they going to do? Sanction some settlers? Hammer on a few settlers? And so it's a joke.
Unlike the population, the European politicians, Israel as Donald Trump and American Congress. Don't you agree, Joaquin?
Yeah, I mean, basically, America is doing sanctions against the settlers in the West Bank. Right. That's how far it goes. You know, right. They won't go beyond that. You know, it's just absurd.
Well, just pathetic, because when good men do nothing, evil reigns, and it's reached a catastrophic situation now. I thought Alistair was good. Those who wonder, by the way, about the nature of morality, I have a relatively recent piece evaluating moral theories that some may find illuminating on my blog at jameshfetzer.org. Meanwhile, Witkoff says, and this is, of course, completely absurd, the red line for Iran is no enrichment, not even 1%, which everyone who's followed the issue for 15 years knows is a complete non-starter. It's also a position of the Senate Republicans. Are these people complete ignoramuses? Are we, in fact, being governed by morons? Here, let's check this out.
Well, the president has been very clear. He wants to solve this conflict diplomatically. And
we've heard that before. Meanwhile, Press TV, unrealistic demands. These guys are so good. I love Press TV.
Has reacted to U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff's recent remarks stressing Tehran will continue its uranium enrichment.
Being completely unrealistic when it comes to negotiations. Iran will continue its uranium enrichment.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Completely detached to the reality of negotiations.
Was it a conspiracy? Did you know that the police in Boston were broadcasting, "This is a drill, this is a drill," on bullhorns during the marathon? That the Boston Globe was tweeting that a demonstration bomb would be set off during the marathon for the benefit of bomb squad activities? And that one would be set off in 1 minute in front of the library, which happened as the Globe had announced. Peering through the smoke, you could see bodies with missing arms and legs, but there was no blood. The blood only showed up later and came out of a tube. They used amputee actors and a studio-quality smoke machine. Don't let yourself be played. Check out And Nobody Died in Boston Either. Available at moonrockbooks.com. That's moonrockbooks.com.
To be able to continue to get away with the aggression and the death of, there's no.
If you think for 1 second that the Capitol will ever treat us fairly, you are lying to yourselves. Because we know who they are and what they do. This is what they do, and we must fight back.
Yes.
You can torture us and bomb us. Fire is catching. And if we burn, you burn with us.
Good evening.
We're at another break joint, Russ.
Are you awake yet? I hope.
We'll take a couple of minutes here of silence.
We've tried and we've tried for years and years to use passive resistance and loud voices to make a change. But time is over. Your governments around the world have no other goal than to decimate your entire existence at the hands of the bankers and the elites. The war is coming, and it's your choice to decide if you want to be a warrior or a victim. Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the number one listener-supported radio station on the planet. Not giving up. Revolution Radio.
It is no secret that the so-called mainstream media is best described as controlled propaganda. Countless news stories are either totally ignored or spun with half-truths, and because of this, essential facts and vital information are often compromised. Join Dr. Ott every Friday night on Studio B at 10 p.m. Eastern and learn why The Story Behind the Story was nominated for a Peabody Award in its second year of producing unparalleled broadcasting excellence in 1997. That is, if you really care about learning the truth.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, let's resume with a hopefully happy compromise here in terms of what's being broadcast where we cannot hear the breaks. Russ, go right ahead with Winter Watch. Tell us.
Okay, meme of the day is the Forrest Gump and his little girlfriend on the bus. And Forrest says, "Looks like the FBI is back on our side." And his little girlfriend looks at him, "Are you stupid or something?"
Oh,
that's of course referring to the FBI guys all of a sudden declaring that Epstein killed himself with suicide. And yet that Bongino guy, he was just gagging when he made his comments. It just looked to me like somebody had the talk with him.
Yeah, he knew he was lying through his teeth and he didn't like it.
No, that's my impression too.
Yeah.
Okay, so we already covered this. CNN reports that Israel's plans. I think it's more than plans. It's actually they're going to attack the Iranian nuclear facilities.
We haven't covered it yet. Russ, go into it.
Oh, the story is oil prices surged above $64. Reports that Israel has plans to attack Iranian nuclear facilities. So just all over this morning when I got out of bed, I just saw one story after another relating to this. So we might be very, very close to an attack on Iran to kind of make things even more dicey.
I think there's going to be a big surprise for Israel militarily because Iran, in my opinion, can shellac them.
We got the credit markets are currently, so if you go to the credit default markets, it's like another market on credit that's maybe a little bit more speculative, but it's kind of more an aggressive market. So a lot of the players in the swap market are currently pricing in 6-level credit downgrade for the U.S. to triple.
Wow. That is huge. That is staggering.
The credit default swap market derived signal score, there it is right there, BB triple B.
Pathetic.
And that big, beautiful bill that trying to get passed.
Yeah, what is this lunacy? He doesn't even understand the economics of business? I mean, my God.
Yeah, he's very, very weird. He's saying things to like Amazon and Walmart, you need to eat the tariffs.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's not exactly a free market guy. He's
making an enemy of everybody, basically.
It's an executive directed economy with him just sort of pontificating whatever he feels like at the moment, which is usually just big brain nonsense. This is interesting. I think this sort of describes our world today. Okay, so here's this gal, this Mexican ship that ran into the Brooklyn Bridge. You guys saw that, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, we knew there was a ship, but this is not it, of course, is it? This is the ship. This is the ship that hit the bridge?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a tourist ship then, huh?
No, Navy.
There it is. Unbelievable.
We've seen this one before.
Yeah, we have, but not with.
I mean, remember the bridge in Virginia in D.C.?
Yeah.
These are all staged.
There's something really weird about this because this girl's just sitting there, and I'm sure she kind of caught by surprise, but the situational awareness of people is really low. They don't really even realize what's going on. Here's a better view of it. Okay, here's the ship. And people are going, there's people up there. Okay, they came in under the bridge, rammed into the bridge on the top, and there's guys up there. You can see
they're all on the mast.
Yeah, they're up on the mast.
Unbelievable.
Right.
What are they doing there?
And then they all a bunch of them fell over.
There's people up there.
Oh my, look at that. Look at that.
Who did?
Terrible.
How stupid.
It's crashing.
Did they didn't know the height of their mast was greater than the height of the bridge? I mean, this is ridiculous.
The ship was in reverse for a long time to go into the bridge.
Well,
it was another maybe remote control.
all right, it's hard not to laugh. I could see a meteor heading right towards us, and it would just be like, oh, well, LMAO, laughing my ass off. I don't care. Magical thinking.
Very strange indeed.
But it seems like the perfect event for our times. You know, the girl sitting there, just totally oblivious, no situational awareness at all. Okay, we covered the UK, Canada, France, last warning for Israel. We'll see about that. People can go and look at this. If people want a little bit more on the economy, that Apollo just released. We covered the Apollo charts before, and this one is 121-page deck on U.S. real estate and housing. And a few little interesting factoids in there. We don't have time to go through the whole deck, but people can get it. The median age of homeowners is now 56 years old, compared to 31 years old in 1980.
Wow, that's huge. Huge.
Young people can't afford it anymore.
That's right. That's what it means. Unreal.
It is unreal. So there's a whole bunch of
forget any talk of the American dream. You're never going to be a homeowner today.
You know, unless you got parents unless you got parents that are going to pass their houses on to you. I don't know. I suppose that could happen. There's probably going to be a lot of, when the baby boomers die off, there's going to be a lot of wealth transfers. Big Brain Trump and Bruce Springsteen are engaged in a big smackdown.
Yeah, what is that about? I know the boss was speaking out against Trump. Here you go.
Here's what Trump says.
Okay,
here's Bruce Springsteen. You know, he's basically got a problem with the genocide,
which
That's
is
what he's speaking
totally reasonable. Go ahead.
Totally reasonable.
But he's also a hardcore Democrat.
We can't hear it. We can't hear it, Russ. We can't.
Okay, he's basically saying we're dealing with fascism. And but Trump says, I see that highly overrated Bruce Springsteen goes to a foreign country to speak badly about the president of the United States. Never liked him, never liked his music or his radical left politics. Importantly, he's not a talented guy, just a pushy, obnoxious jerk who fervently supported crooked Joe Biden, a mentally incompetent fool, and our worst ever president who came close to destroying our country. If I wasn't elected, it would have be gone by now. Sleepy Joe didn't have a clue as to what he was doing, but Springsteen is as dumb as a rock and couldn't see what was going on. Or could he, which is even worse, this dried out prune of a rocker, his skin is all atrophied, ought to keep his mouth shut until he gets back into the country. That's just standard fare. Then we'll see how, and then his last sentence is a little bit of a threat. Then we'll all see how it goes for him. Yeah.
I think he's implying his fans will abandon him because of their greater loyalty to Trump. But I'm not so sure that's going to play out that way. I think Trump's losing a hell of a lot of support, even among those of us who really were enthusiastic about him. He's proving to be a phony, a fraud, unprincipled, not living up to his campaign promises, a war guy, not a peace guy. I don't like it.
But he continues to feel like he needs to feud with people like this in public domain.
I think
mean-spirited things about him.
He was reinstalled by the power structure to basically polarize the world and bring America down.
It sure looks like
Moody's downgraded U.S. credit after the close on Friday.
I love this NYU guy. I mean, seems out.
What he had to say. They got an investigation into the guy, and they withheld his diploma.
I know it's outrageous. He's totally reasonable. It's understated. Listen to this.
Can you hear it?
Barely. Maybe you can turn up the sound.
I don't know why it's.
I think maybe you didn't hit the sound thing when you went on, the Zoom. You got to click those two boxes. Try to get it if you can. I mean, I think this guy's wonderful. He's a hero in my book.
I've been freaking out a lot about this speech, honestly. And as I...
Can you read over it? Can you guys hear it? Or
I'm turning it up. I'm turning it up.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Today, in addressing you all, my moral and political commitments guide me to say that the only thing that is appropriate to say in this time and to a group this large is a recognition of the atrocities currently happening in Palestine.
The audience just goes wild. I don't know why we can't hear it. They were wild. I mean, they're hooting, hollering, yelling, calling out, clapping. They love it. They agree.
Want to say that the genocide currently occurring is supported politically and militarily by the United States, is paid for by our tax dollars, and has been live streamed to our phones for the past 18 months. And that I do not wish to speak only to my own politics today, but to speak for all people of conscience and all people who feel the moral injury of this atrocity.
Again, more enthusiastic, wild support.
I want to say that I condemn this genocide and complicity in this genocide.
Again, there's so much response from the audience. He's doing a long pause, but it's there and it's wild and enthusiastic.
Thank you to the class of 2025.
Anyway, then he was, it withheld his diploma.
Yeah, on the grounds that the speech he gave wasn't the one that they'd approved. But that's pathetic. Under these circumstances, they ought to be congratulating him, awarding him, recognizing him. This was a courageous act.
Yeah, it's kind of a typical. Yeah, when I listened to it, I thought I was going to hear something real controversial.
Yeah, see how mild he was? I mean, totally understated. Tell us about big brain Trump on submarines. I can't wait to hear.
Weapon, as you say. We're also doing very heavy on submarines. We have a lead on submarines that I don't think, unless you have a really, really stupid group of people, including the president, I don't think anybody can catch us on submarines. We have our submarine, in particular, the late model. We're 15 years advanced on the submarine. Nobody can even come close. It can stay underwater for 30 years.
Stay underwater for 30 years. Only has to come up for food.
Come up for air for 30 years.
Because they have their system of water, which is They can stay forever. The only reason it has to come up is for food. Can you imagine? It could stay underwater for years, going at fast speeds, to very fast speeds, but it has to come up once every couple of months for food. There's something about that. I don't know if we're going to be able to solve that problem, but hopefully it's not going to be a problem we have to worry about. But the submarine, we are so far advanced in the submarine. So we're very...
So that's Trump's world. That's his little fantasy world that he lives in.
It's like he's treating it like a toy.
Yeah, Big Brain explains the term groceries. This is to the president of the UAE.
We sure need that.
Because to me, the most important jobs. I want jobs. And we have costs are way down. Groceries, they have a term, grocery. It's an old term, but it means basically what you're buying, food. It's a pretty accurate term, but it's an old-fashioned sound. But groceries are down, costs are down, eggs are down. They were, first week they were hitting me with eggs were up 200%, and now they're down to a number that is amazing. We're down 97, 98% from where they were. And everybody, they said, you won't have eggs for Easter. Well, we had everybody had eggs for Easter at a very reasonable price. At the White House, we had our little Easter egg roll, and we had hundreds of thousands of eggs purchased. They said, you have to go out and buy plastic eggs. That didn't work out.
What's the guy even talking about?
Saudi Arabia giving $25 million, Qatar, all of these countries. You talk about women and women's rights. So these are people that push gays off buildings. These are people that kill women and treat women horribly, and yet you take their money. So I'd like to ask you right now, why don't you give back the money that you've taken from certain countries that treat certain groups of people so horribly? Why don't you give back the money? I think it would be a great gesture.
She's talking about Qatar. They just gave him the $400 million plane.
I know, aircraft, yeah.
That was in the 2016 debate. Deeply creepy, enormous brooding manner of Trump now hangs next to Lincoln outside the Department of Agriculture. Look at that. Look at this.
That doesn't even look like him. I think that's a Trump double, actually. No, some more silver hair. That's a Trump double right there.
Very Orwellian looking.
That's not Donald Trump. That's one of his doubles, I guarantee you. For a man who self-claims to be a genius.
Yes, for a man who go ahead, read it.
Apparently thinks like an 8th grader. And we all thought that the geriatric was an embarrassment. God help us. Meaning we went from dementia to a moron. Wow.
Well, that kind of brings us to the Biden story.
Yeah.
So he's got stage 9 prostate cancer, and that hasn't been around for a while. He's just all of a sudden just boom.
He was diagnosed
3 years ago.
Yeah.
He even admitted it. He even let it slip out.
Yeah, this is old news. This was to soften the cushion of her release of the interviews that were so embarrassing. So trying to, have a story that sort of smothers or pushes aside the real story, which was the interviews that showed he was incompetent. And now the question becomes, who the hell was running the government for the last 4 years? The auto pen scandal. You got that in your list here, Russ, the auto pen scandal?
No, the auto pen scandal. They're kind of talking about maybe that Obama, Obama was set up a block and a half away, was kind of run.
Yeah, I think Obama had to be running. I mean, I have a friend.
Well, it puts into question everything that he signed. It may not even be lawful now.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all that. Yes.
Well, the whole thing on the prostate cancer. I mean, you can have prostate cancer for years. My dad had it. My dad got it when I think he was diagnosed when he was 83.
Yeah.
He never died of it because most prostate cancer never really gets out of hand. So he may have had prostate cancer. No, really not that big of a deal if it was kind of low grade cancer.
But now they're saying it's spread into his bones.
Yeah. Major invasion build up on the Gaza border. We kind of covered that. The genocid's intensity. So you got Iran and Gaza almost simultaneously, with the entire world basically threatening sanctions. Kind of an interesting point in time. Big brain Trump pontificates on Zionist plant Jolani. He says, on meeting the former Al Qaeda leader, he says Jolani is a young, attractive guy with a very strong past.
Yeah, as a terrorist. A strong past as a terrorist.
Up to $10 million reward.
Right. How do we talk about how many he beheaded, how many women he raped, how many children he slaughtered? That guy is an impressive resume.
Now he's
unbelievable.
He's an attractive man. Wow.
All right, we haven't seen any resistance combat footage for a while, so let's watch a little of that. So they're getting back into the fighting. This is in Rafah.
Russ, if you want to add any commentary, it would be welcome because we're not hearing a sound.
Okay, yeah, here comes some Israelis that got them in sight. There's about 5 of them, 6 of them. Totally unaware they're being observed. Here they are in the distance. So it looks like
listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Management would like to take a moment to thank the listeners and hosts for all their support that has made Revolution Radio one of the biggest platforms for free speech in an ever-growing dark world of censorship. Unfortunately, this platform for free speech has never been free. We need the support of the people. It is the people like you, yes, you, that keeps the station in the front lines of the battle against tyranny and oppression. Please help support Revolution Radio so free speech will not be silenced in a world that seems to be going deaf to the real truth. With your support, we will be able to become an even bigger pillar of light in a dark world.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Revolution Radio.
5 more Israelis on patrol. Looks like they have a mine set up for them.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for momentary
the tank's turning around.
Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com.
It looks like he encounters an IUD
station.
Even the government admits that 9/11 was a conspiracy. But did you know that it was an inside job? That Osama had nothing to do with it. That the Twin Towers were blown apart by a sophisticated arrangement of mini or micro nukes. That Building 7 collapsed 7 hours later because of explosives planted in the building. Barry Jennings was there. He heard them go off and felt himself stepping over dead people. The U.S. Geological Survey conducted studies of dust gathered from 35 locations in Lower Manhattan and found elements that would not have been there had this not been a nuclear event. Ironically, that means the government's own evidence contradicts the government's official position. 9/11 was brought to us compliments of the CIA, the neocons in the Department of Defense, and the Mossad. Don't let yourself be played. Read America Nuked on 9/11. Available at moonrockbooks.com. That's moonrockbooks.com.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
We'll give it about 30 seconds more. Here's Bernie Sanders saying U.S. Democrats are silent on the Gaza genocide because of fear of AIPAC. Fear of AIPAC. Wow. U.S. veteran politician Bernie Sanders accused pro-Israel lobby groups, especially AIPAC, of forcibly silencing U.S. Democrats using financial and political tactics to prevent them from supporting anti-war efforts opposing Israel's horrific war on Gaza. Sanders, 83, said in an interview with talk show host Stephen Colbert, Friday's episode of The Late Show, that his Democratic colleagues were dissuaded from speaking out on the Gaza genocide, which killed at least 53,119 Palestinians, and that number is just ridiculously low, due to threats that pro-Israel group would fund their challengers. The Vermont senator also compared AIPAC's influence to Elon Musk's sway over Republicans. I happen to believe what's going on in Gaza is horrific. We're seeing children now as we speak starving to death, Sanders told Colbert. Well, why do you think more Democrats are not speaking up on the issue, he asked. If you speak on the issue, you'll have super PACs like AIPAC going after you the same way Elon Musk goes after Republicans, referencing the GOP Lawmakers facing pressure from billionaire Musk for defying the party line, especially on issues like health care. Musk, of course, was President Trump's largest donor in the 2024 campaign and has played a key role in his admin since the election. Sanders also doubled down. This is a party trying to call in, but I can't. We'll be cut off from the studio if I allow it. Sanders also doubled down on his warnings about oligarchy following Trump's reelection, arguing such influence has made the government unresponsive to the needs of ordinary people. Yes, Bernie, I do think you got that right. And here's more. America is occupied.
Very soon, I'll be closing the doors to...
Let's check this out.
You want to know why America's cooked? It's not China. It's not Russia. It's this.
It's your first Ford. Yeah. And you're walking with the Congresswoman. Yes. Oh, my gosh, please.
Well, thank you so much for your community service.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering, with all the support of Republicans and people who are anti-choice and people who are working to disrupt our election systems that AIPAC is doing right now, I'm wondering why you're accepting their support. I'm a Jew and my family lives here in this community. Yeah. And I really think that those kinds of candidates are making the Jewish people less safe. I'm wondering why you're accepting their.
Well, thank you so much for coming and bringing your kiddo. It's so nice to meet with you.
It's nice to meet you too. I'm just wondering, I want to make life and this country safe place for him to grow up in. I'm wondering why you would want to accept it. I $100,000 in ads this year. I guys, we have received how much that company was?
Turns your back on her.
Holy ignore. We've got a lot of local labor and
You are a great representative and we really appreciate your support. I'm just hoping you guys. Oh my God, you guys.
This is not whoa, that's right about.
Oh, I have so many endorsements everywhere. Bye. Yeah, a congresswoman who purports to care about Jewish safety, but won't answer any questions from her own constituents voicing concerns about their safety. That was Representative Haley Stevens, Democrat from Michigan's 11th district. And this may sound like a crazy conspiracy theory, but she was placed in that seat specifically to represent Israel. That's right. Back in 2022, the pro-Israel lobby donated $3 million to her campaign in a safe Democrat district because they wanted to oust the incumbent, Andy Levin, an actual Jewish representative, because they deemed him not pro-Israel enough. Quote, AIPAC has targeted Levin for defeat because while he comes from a well-known Jewish political family and has voiced support for Israel's existence, he has also been sharply critical of that nation's policy towards Palestinians living in Israeli-controlled territories.
I'm really Jewish, but AIPAC can't stand the idea that I am the clearest, strongest Jewish voice in Congress, standing for a simple proposition that there's no way to have a secure democratic homeland for the Jewish people unless we achieve the political and human rights of the Palestinian people.
That is all it takes, folks. The mildest form of criticism, and you're out. To serve in the United States Congress, you must pledge 100% allegiance to Israel. Hence why Haley Stevens, who supposedly cares a lot about Jewish lives, can act with such disdain towards her own Jewish constituents. Once again, to put it bluntly, she is not there to serve the people of Michigan. She's there to serve Israel. And if AIPAC and the rest of the pro-Israel lobbying apparatus even catches wind of a slight waver in your support of Israel, you better watch out.
Here are the top 20 recipients in Congress, the House and the Senate, of AIPAC money in the 2022 midterm cycle, according to Open Secrets. They're members of both parties. They come from every corner of the country with varying levels of experience in Congress. The Democrat Glenn Ivey of Maryland tops the list. He beat out fellow Democrat Donna Edwards in Maryland's House primary after AIPAC poured millions into pro-Ivey advertisements and mailers. Edwards was running for a second stint in Congress after serving during the Obama administration, where she voted present, not even a no, on a number of pro-Israel resolutions. So the money poured in against her.
And next on the list is Thomas Massie of Kentucky to punish him for exposing that every Republican member of Congress has a, quote, AIPAC handler. The last thing I'll say, because I want to leave it on a positive note, a note of action, is to say that for people who maybe don't care to pay attention to politics because it's so depressing, it's a cesspool, I have a tip, a heuristic, and that is the easiest way to decide who to vote for is whichever candidate has raised the least amount of money, because that means they are more beholden to the people who vote for them and not for the people who fund them. My name is James Lee. This is the 5149 Show. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe for more.
I'd like that. I'd like that. Vote for the person who's received the less money. Your thoughts, Russ, beginning with you.
Well, you know, when I watched something like this, I mean, it's great that the Jewish lady went up there and challenged her. You know, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's good that she did that. But why don't they just show the Goyim doing that? I mean, you know, you never. It's like the Goyim can't. It's just like a little mouse over in the corner can't say a friggin' thing.
You mean they're only
the Jewish dissidents can? I mean, they can step up to the plate and get publicity and get their word in. But let's say you and I had confronted that congresswoman, wouldn't have gone anywhere.
You're saying from the way they present it, the body politic consists of the pro-Israel and the even more pro-Israel, and that's the only debate. How can we be sufficiently supportive of Israel?
They're really only challenging her on the idea that she accepted money from AIPAC. But what if you and I had asked that question?
Yeah.
We wouldn't have seen the light of day. That's the problem. That's my big complaint.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice the lady did that. Fine. I mean, don't take me wrong. I'm not really criticizing her.
Yeah.
I shot at it too.
Yeah. Joaquin, your thoughts?
Well, you know, the bottom line is unless you have the money from Israel, AIPAC, you're not going to get elected. I mean, and, you know, a couple months ago, I think Trump was singling out Massie for basically, you know, going against and admitting, you know, he admitted with Tucker Carlson now about 6 months ago that they all have handlers. And you know, if you go against it, you're out. So, yeah, you basically have a better chance if the person takes the least amount. I think that's a pretty logical point. That's probably true. And they are more representative of their constituents than those that get paid off the most by Israel.
Yeah, it's a fascinating rule of thumb. When in doubt, vote for the guy who doesn't have any some financial support, because he'll be more beholden to the constituents who voted for him, more likely to act on your behalf. I like that.
And X, there's an AIPAC tracker. I don't know if you've seen it on AIPAC.
Go ahead.
AIPAC tracker.
Go ahead.
And they put up the guys that are accepting the money regularly, so you can easily find out.
Yeah, it's on
AIPAC tracker who's taking the money.
Wow.
Yeah, they come out every day on X with the latest figures on all the politicians.
Listen, here we got United States ranked 57th in world press freedom. Can you believe that? How awful. A wrong story there with the headline. Meanwhile, Larry Johnson asked, "Do we still have a constitution?" That's a hell of a good question. I'm not at all sure we do. Here's it with Judge Napolitano.
My dear friend, thank you for joining us, accommodating my schedule. You wrote a fascinating piece. You write a great piece each day at Sonar 21. But you wrote a fascinating piece the other day, the essence of which is, do we still have a constitution? Which, of course, is my other field. And I do want to talk to you about that. But before we get there, this issue of the firing of 2 senior CIA analysts was raised over the weekend. Again, you and Ray and I talked about it on Monday. These 2 senior people, after an exhaustive study, concluded that the gang Tren de Aragua is not controlled by or affiliated with the Venezuelan government, and they were given permission to reveal their finding. Then Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, fired them and ordered another evaluation. Then, this is what happened over the weekend, Secretary Rubio, without citing any source, said Tren de Aragua is controlled by the Venezuelan government. Now, I don't know if he was saying that because that's a part of President Trump's narrative, which seeps into his efforts to use the Enemy Alien Act, or if Rubio's State Department conducted its own analysis. But my question to you is, I guess CIA or intelligence analysis is corruptible and can be corrupted by politicians.
Newsflash. Go talk to George Allen, not the former football coach, but George Allen was in charge of the analysis during the Vietnam War and the political pressure that he encountered. I was just recounting to someone else earlier today the story of John Reed and Bob Gates at the CIA. So when Bob Gates was the director of intelligence, headed the Directorate of Intelligence, DI, the Reagan administration was in power, and Reagan wanted to know, is Nelson Mandela a communist? And so John Reed, the analyst, covered South Africa. He wrote, and his bottom line was this: although Nelson Mandela has had associations and relationships with people who are known communists, Nelson Mandela is not a communist. Judge, can you guess what word Bob Gates changed in that assessment?
Oh, good God, he dropped the word not?
Took not out.
Wow.
Now, so, if that's happening, so yes, the intelligence is highly politicized, unfortunately. It got worse under Biden. So I really don't know what the ground truth is right now, because so much of the media is going to try to manufacture something to indict Trump when they're actually maybe trying to clean it up. But on the other hand, it may be taking place. I don't know.
A year or two ago, when Biden started funding the genocide in Gaza and the war in Ukraine, you and Ray and Phil Giraldi and all of your colleagues on this show have made it crystal clear that the analysts on the ground produce raw data as best they can, as truthful as they can, as accurate as they can. Sometimes they risk their lives to get it. And then it's the Bob Gateses, some mid or higher level management person, that twists it so that the ultimate listener, the president, gets what he wants to hear. I gather that still goes on today. How does Donald Trump know if he's getting accurate information from the intelligence community, or if he's hearing what Tulsi Gabbard thinks he wants to hear? And if the latter is the case, what has changed?
Okay, there are two filters that you have to deal with. Filter one is the case officers in the field, when they're collecting raw intelligence from human sources and reporting that back up the chain of command.
Right.
Sometimes that chain of command on what's was known as the Directorate of Operations in my day will prevent that information from getting out. I saw that firsthand with what was going on in Central America with the war that we were waging against the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. And a couple of analysts from the Nicaragua side went down to Honduras, and they were accosted by angry case officers saying, "Why aren't you putting this information out?" And they showed them all the reports that they had been generating that were pointing out that the weaknesses on the side of the Contras. Well, it turned out that their chain of command, one guy that you've had on your show, Jack Devine, were covering it up. We're not releasing it to the Directorate of Intelligence. So that's one filter, where the DO can self-filter, prevent information from coming in that's accurate. Then when you get to the analytical side, taking what's available and drawing conclusions and presenting that to the White House, there's also the pressure to say, oh, you can't say that. So the prime example right now is this notion that Russia suffered, terrible casualties because the director of operations is relying exclusively on information that's coming out of the Ukrainian sources instead of accurately reporting what's going on and using a whole variety of methods that could be used to track, such as following obituaries in Russia, looking at the size and expanse of cemeteries that are in Russia as compared to Ukraine. Number one is that you could tell that it's Ukraine that's suffering the overwhelming number of fatalities, not Russia.
So when Donald Trump says the Russians have lost 1 million people, a number we know is grossly, grossly inaccurate, do you think he thinks it's true? Do you think some intel source has told him that, whether the intel source knew it was inaccurate or not?
Yeah. I think that's highly likely. We've got the Russians and Ukrainians have been exchanging corpses of soldiers. And over the last 3 months, for each Russian body that's turned over to Russia, Russia is giving Ukraine 25 to 27 bodies each month. In other words, it's a 27-to-1 ratio. Now, some would argue, say, well, that's just because Russia's advancing and Ukraine's not able to recover the bodies of those that the Russians are killing. And I said, okay, if that's the case, then so much for this claim that the war is a stalemate. Right. Because it's not a stalemate, because Russia is continually moving forward. But you've also got the disparity between the amount of artillery that Russia can fire and the limited.
This is the quickest way to clear out stuck poop.
Well, mind you that
crazy ad. It's a crazy ad.
They sneak them in. Most casualties in war are caused by artillery. And the 27-to-1 ratio is extraordinarily telling. But I think what was most important is why Trump may be in a state of false belief. That's what he's been told by his sources on whom he's relying. Joaquin, your thoughts?
Well, he's either stupid or he's getting misinformation, and it's probably a combination of both.
Yeah.
He's pig-headed, and extremely stubborn, and egotistical, and he filters everything through that brain. But he isn't getting the true information either. Everything is so politicized now that they're not willing to concede that they're losing the war. It's so lopsided. It used to be a ratio of like 1 to 10, 10 Ukrainian soldiers for 1 Russian, but now it's just wide open.
Russ.
Yeah, well, Trump's going to be completely incapable of processing anything on any issue. It's whatever his big brain comes up with, whatever he wants to pontificate or ramble at any particular point in time. So he doesn't have any intelligence. First of all, he doesn't have any real intelligence anyway, even if he relied on it. And secondly, he probably doesn't rely on it and just kind of pulls it out of his ass. So that's how he governs. That's apparent. We've covered that over and over and over again on our shows.
I think his senior moments are catching up to him too.
Yeah. You want to expand? He's just running out of gas mentally, cognitively.
Yeah. I mean, what is he? He's pushing 79 or 8.
Yeah,
is he 79?
Yeah.
I think he's slowing down, and he's totally everything's ego driven. His defenses are aroused all the time. If he thinks that he's not getting the due respect, everything is petty with him.
Like the Bruce Springsteen.
It's misjudgment.
Yeah, Bruce Springsteen examples. I mean, that's not how a classy person interacts, even with their enemies.
I agree. That was a bad.
And he made a threat at the end.
Yeah.
He made a threat. Well, when you come home, we'll see about that.
Yeah. Gentlemen, we're approaching the conclusion of our conversation today. Give me some final thoughts. Russ, yours first.
Nope, the Gaza offensive is getting underway. There's possible attack on Iran underway. There's probably a big offensive starting in Ukraine soon enough. A lot of conflict going on in the world. On the economic side, it's just kind of like running out the sand. It's a lot of convergences of events.
Yeah, I'm thinking
something's going to happen. Something is going to happen. It's just like that picture of that ship going into the bridge. People just don't think. They're not really steeped in reality that shit does happen. Things do happen.
I hate the fact that NYU is withholding the diploma of the student who condemned the genocide. He deserves our admiration or applause, our congratulations. He had the integrity, the intelligence, the courage to speak out. In the latest example of escalating repression against Palestinian solidarity activism on U.S. campuses, NYU student speaker Logan Rosso, after he used his commencement address to denounce Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza and U.S. complicity. Rossos, graduating from NYU's Gallatin School of Individualized Study, told his fellow students on Wednesday, the only thing appropriate to say at this time and to a group this large is a recognition of the atrocities currently happening in Palestine. And would you believe, for that very mild statement, the university is punishing him severely and investigating him? Joaquin, what has happened to this once great country?
Well, the same thing is happening all over. I mean, look at our closest allies. Here's 3 quick headlines. British school kids are being taught Negroes built Stonehenge. Canada moves to begin euthanizing children without parental consent. 80% of French women want the army deployed in French cities to protect them. I mean, this is where we're at, folks.
It's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Russ, any further thoughts?
No, that last one was pretty hard to beat. 80% of these women want the army deployed. They can't depend on the police and the gendarmes.
Well, you know, the gang rapes in the UK are totally out of control. These Pakistani gangs have been raping some 20,000 British schoolgirls, and the press will report about it. The police won't do anything about it. How horrific can it get?